Oh shit, ladies and gentlemen, how you doing out there? This is Intergalactic Interviews, and this is episode 123. And before we get into our guest, the return of Kyle MacDonald, I'd like to just let you all know about a very special opportunity. I have to let you know about it without our co-host Michael Saavedra. He's not in today, but that's okay. We're going to move ahead. I'm going to do the part that he usually does because, I mean, I'm a lazy fuck and I usually make him do that stuff. So hey, ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking right now to check out the premier isolation experience in the Lower Mainland, you should go and check out floathouse.ca. The podcast promo code we use to get 20% off your next float is II Podcast. That's for our listeners only, our watchers only. If you're watching this on YouTube, hello. Thank you very much for watching. We appreciate all your support now that we're the award-winning second overall podcast. Can't even say that without laughing because it's like, I don't even know what that means. But the reality is we're happy, and we're happy with our sponsors, and our sponsors have this excellent space that they want to share with you. Float House is such a cool place. You get your own private shower, your own private room, obviously. So you get your own like house coat, slippers. The tank is private, obviously. And it's just this beautiful spa experience. It's actually like a spa for your mind. That's why I like it. I float. You should float. Try it out. It's easy. Use our podcast promo code II Podcast and go to floathouse.ca. Kyle McDonald. Or is it MacDonald?
MacDonald with a capital D.
That's right. And I am McDonald with a capital D. I don't let them slide on the name.
Never.
I don't ever let them slide.
I met, I believe her name's Heather MacDonald at the bank at RBC.
Heather.
And she had a space. Heather Mac space Donald. And I'd never seen
now,
that before.
CK or
you might have just opened up
space DONALD capital
That sounds
D.
like a clerical
You might
error.
have just opened up a very sore point for me because I recently had to exchange all my identification, as I may have notably explained last week, and it's gathered some feedback basically that now I have identification that is not my last name because there was a space in my birth certificate that I didn't know about. And even though I have a passport that says it properly according to provincial driver's license places, I have a space in my name now too, which is fucking retarded because that's not how you spell my name.
If you go to like a hotel and they're like, "What's your last name?" and you go McDonald, if there's a Martin there, the MC will be after the Martin. So there's MacDonald will be first, and then McDonald will be third, and then Martin will be in the middle. So that often they'll be looking for MC Donald, and they can't find it. And then you go, "Oh no, it has an A."
Right. Yeah.
It's boring, but I'm curious. I asked her, Heather, at RBC at first in commercial, whether or not with the space, did that cause any problems? Was it categorized as a Mac, like a Vander, or like a
Dutch
O'Malley? Was it like Mac? And then they saw that as her middle name. Anyways, she didn't know. But I had my baby with me, and she smiled at the baby. So.
Congratulations, by the way, on being a father.
Thanks, yeah.
That's how old is your child now?
14 months.
14 months.
Yep.
So you're like right in the throes of it. You're like, all the newborn stuff is coming to an end, and
she's just getting going. She just started walking, so it's really cool to see her put the shoes on and rip around.
That's pretty cool. You get to see the evolution and the growth of like a mini you.
Keeps growing. Yeah, she looks more like her mom.
I'm gonna vicariously live through you on that because I don't think I'm gonna have kids. So I'm gonna say that's awesome for you.
Well, I'll tell you what. Neither of us will probably have kids, but someone else might, with our help.
This is a perfect segue. The specificity of language is so important. Is it not, Kyle McDonald?
It is, but that's just like a bad joke.
I know that. You are a funny guy. I'm gonna pump your tires here for a bit. You are. Before we get into anything, I just have to let you know that I think you're a brilliant dude. I think that you have really unique views. I think your views, and I'm not speaking about recent stuff. I'm just speaking about in the last 10 to 15 years, you have this very unique perspective on how to turn people on their ear, essentially. There's this large-scale ignorance out there that you're able to just somehow cut through, and you have this very unique perspective. And I really respect you for that. I think that that's really at the forefront before we talk about anything. I need everyone to know that is you. And I think you're a brilliant dude, and no matter what you believe, because that is just the nature of your mind. That's
Thanks.
what I think.
And I just like to add that I'm honest, and it comes from a good place, and it's often misinterpreted as trolling or intentionally stirring the pot to cause trouble, and that's definitely not the case. I'm very sincere when I say stuff, but it seems to many people like I'm being sarcastic.
You recognize
it's so far
that
outside the realm. Oh yeah.
No, so you can recognize that it would appear to be trolling, modern trolling, so to speak.
Most people think I'm sarcastic. They think I'm joking. I'm being sarcastic, and it's okay. It's not a. This is like less than a first world problem. But I'll say something, and they'll go, "Yeah, whoa, jokes," or so, and I'm like, "No, like I'm serious." It's a battle to try and convey that I'm like, yeah, we can have fun with it, but no, I'm serious about it. Like, it's not a joke.
I think that's important that you explain how sincere you are.
Sure.
Because we should probably address this. So, I think you're a brilliant guy. So I look at someone I consider a friend that I've known for several years now. I think you're a brilliant guy, and I see you posting about things about flat Earth and about common understandings in quote unquote science.
Yeah, like gravity.
I'm speaking of this, trying to approach this from the angle that you have been speaking on. So I see these posts, and I think to myself, if I didn't know you, I would think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But I do know you, and I know you're not a dumb guy. I know you're very well read. You do tons of research. People and experiences that you are involved in. There's no weakness to that. There's no people that just get involved with someone crazy, quote unquote. Like I know you're not crazy. So I want to know, first of all, where did this come from? Where were you when you said, I feel like I need to speak out about this?
You know what? I researched real estate in Vancouver all through I've been dealing with real estate for 20 years on and off, taking like urban economic classes at UBC and stuff. And we fixed and flipped a few houses in East Van. Okay. And I've always been fascinated with how the city works and how things are connected. And everyone in Vancouver was going, housing's expensive because foreign investment. And something about that just rung weird. And I started seeing real estate signs in like Chinese, and I started getting not triggered, but like something seems off here. So I started looking into it, and sure enough, foreign investment has a small role in the overall thing. But there's so much more. There's like the way that the land is organized and the way that we can't grow out anymore, but people also don't want to allow more density. And we add 70,000 people over like an 18-month period, which is somewhat of a record. And there's inheritances, and the interest rates are really low, and people have basement suites, and the suites now we have laneway houses on these things, and rents are going up. There's all of these factors that nobody wants to touch because everyone wants a single answer. So while I was relaying to everyone like, oh, and look, we don't have freeways, so it's hard to, if you build a house out in Langley, it's hard to get to. So people will pay a premium to stay in. So in other cities where you can easily drive to Langley in 20 minutes, you know what? They're not going to pay so much of a premium for a house in Vancouver. Right. So these things, and people were thinking I was a shill because I was saying things like, oh, I think Bob Rennie's actually right. I think he says he'd like to upzone the entire city so you could allow the supply to meet the demand more naturally. And they're like, you're a shill, you're on the side of developers. And I'm like literally somewhat of a dirtbag, like a good guy, I'd say. But I was saying,
Bob Rennie, who's a developer in the city for people that may not be aware. But
and like he's the condo king or whatever. And I used to think, oh yeah, he's evil, he's gentrifying. And then I looked into it, and it's like, no, he actually does care, I believe. But it's a misread. And people started slamming me, going, this idiot, this shill, what are you, a flat earther? And they kept slamming with flat earther. And I was like, flat earther? What is that?
So before you ever said anything about flat earther, people were already misidentifying you and labeling you like pejorative, like, oh, you must believe in a flat earth, that kind of stuff.
I didn't even know what it was. It didn't stick. I literally took physical geography at university. I took that many classes. I took my pilot's license. I understand globe Earth theory, which sounds like a funny thing to say. I understand that very intricately and very well. When people said flat earther, it was like, what? What is like one of those guys that lives in like Tennessee that's just like a fundamentalist? And it's like, okay, like that's a weird thing to say. And I kept getting called this, and I was like, where's this coming from? I started to realize it was this catch-all term for people who were regressive in their thinking. So I was like, screw it, I'm going to look into this. So I started looking into flat Earth, which nobody does, who slams it. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. You can't see curvature when you have a zoom lens. And then the media outlets are saying that it is a mirage. And then you look into it a bit closer, and that's not what a mirage is. And there's all of these things that were sort of working towards somewhat of a, I wouldn't say a cover-up, but a conviction. So when you're a kid and you're in a classroom, this is my globe. This is a really weird globe.
These headphones, by the way, we've already commented on, are phenomenal.
When you go into class, that's the first thing you see, and it's a globe. And I started to realize that maybe, I don't know for sure, but maybe the format of the Earth is different than we've been taught. However, it is like literally the ultimate, pun intended, global conspiracy to trap our minds into thinking that we live in a finite amount of space. I don't know if it's true, but if you start to think of it from that perspective and you start looking at the evidence out there, the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, the water always does go to a level that you can see across it, that there's all kinds of anomalies in the quote-unquote sphere Earth theory, that if you throw away the sphere and you try to, people always go, oh, but in Erasthenes or whatever that Greek mathematician was.
I was reading about him today,
on the curved Earth, there's sticks like this and the shadows came at different angles.
He traveled, this person we're describing, Erasthenes or something. I forget his name. Yeah, he had placed rods in the ground in one town and had measured them, the shadows that they cast, and then went to another town like 800 miles away, which back at that time would have been an insane travel.
It's a journey.
Big journey. And he went and measured them again, and he noticed they're different, and it gave him the ability to calculate what he determined was the spherical scope of the Earth. So that's what I read today.
Yeah, in the 70s, Carl Sagan comes out with his like model, and he's on TV on Cosmos talking about this, and he goes, and he could calculate the Earth within 2% back there using rudimentary trigonometry. And since the sun is 93 million miles away, we know this is true. And then now, Neil deGrasse Tyson is the new Carl Sagan. He's sort of the head astrophysicist. People call these guys like globe heads.
He's literally hosting the remake of Cosmos.
Yeah.
Like he's the new Carl Sagan. Yeah.
And that all works. But then if you go, all right, if we live on a flat plane and the sun isn't 93 million miles away, if it was lower, the shadows would still show what the Erasthenes model would show. It sounds crazy. So you have to like take 3 steps away from what we've been taught. You have to literally go, all right, the sun is closer and the Earth is flat. Will this proof still work? And it does. And that's the crazy thing. So a lot of the proofs that the Earth is a globe can be disproven very easily. But what they use is simple explanations, and they convince people. And if you look at the term explanation, if we live on a plane, you're explaining it. You're taking it off the plane. So I'm rambling a bit here, but what I'm trying to say is that it is set up so ingrained in our being that like it's almost as if there's a conspiracy on this, it is all or nothing. Like they have the full thing, and people are it's so outside of normal thinking that to imagine that we could not be living on a globe.
I have so many questions, but I think that's what people should have when they're having these.
Sure.
We've been touching on this a lot in the most recent episodes we've had, where I have real difficulty with headline readers, people that read an article by its headline and determine all the information from that, don't do their own research, don't look into the sources, don't look into citing or anything like that. So rather than immediately dismiss what you're saying to me, which I think some people watching right now might even do.
Sure.
They might just be like, oh, this doesn't make sense, so blah, blah. Rather than immediately dismiss it, I'm fascinated. I'm like, okay, tell me, because even our most popular science understanding is that these are just theories that haven't been disproven yet.
Yeah, well, gravity is a theory. People mistake it for a law of physics, but it's a theory, and it's called a phenomenon. And
now,
people are calling it an emergent force, not a primary force. Yeah. So it's the kind of thing like it is a useful tool for explaining what's going on, but there may actually, and this sounds insane, but when you actually look into it, the jury has not everyone in the entire world has said, oh, gravity is absolute no matter what. People are going, oh, no, it can actually be explained by mass, density, volume, and displacement. And if you take it to water or to mercury or to other things like this, it's easier to wrap our heads around. But if you take your headphones and go like this, you go, oh, that's gravity. Yeah. And you go, well, what if this room was filled with mercury? They'd go up. So it's actually, there are ways to explain these things in different terms that we've never been taught, because we go, cut to the chase. We never actually think about it.
And this is where people go, Kyle, I know you, Kyle McDonald. Are you trolling us right now?
No.
Are you doing something here?
If
Long-term.
I was trolling people, and I have been accused of this, someone said, "Oh, you took on this, like you got into the right wing, supporting right wing economics and politics through the fall, and you're just gathering
you
material
became a
for."
dad, and now you're just a different person. You just believe all these different things.
If anyone thinks that, I challenge you to explain to me, and because I'd love to know how I would benefit from that. And what I'm trying to do is I'm doing tangential thinking. So I knocked off using the housing thing where they called me a flat earther. I started looking into it, and then that led looking to the space stuff. And like I'm gonna drop a bunch of weird stuff here. But if you start getting into this
is why you're here. I want to know. I don't. This isn't set up to ridicule you or your thoughts. I'm set up in a completely blank slate. I want to know what you think, and I'll use critical thinking on my end.
This is recent, as of Christmas, so 2 months ago.
Okay,
almost to the day. My trust in NASA as a source of information and credibility, probably close to, actually, you know what, 100%. I never questioned it. Of course, it's NASA. Like, what are you talking about?
That's where I stand right now. I'm like, it's NASA. Where else? I mean, other than the Russians, who else really has anything on their Chinese space programs? Yeah.
And have you, like, back in the 70s, there were some weird conspiracy guys that thought they staged the moon landings and all that.
Right.
And if you look into it, there's a guy named Bart Seibel.
They thought like Stanley Kubrick did it or something. I remember reading that Stanley Kubrick was involved.
Okay.
Something like that.
So then you look into it, and I at first trusted NASA. Of course they went there, no problem. I painted astronauts on the moon. And this guy named Bart Seibel goes around all these astronauts and says, "Will you swear on the Bible to say you walked on the moon?" And Buzz Aldrin punches him in the face. And I was like, yeah, this was last year. Since then, I've looked into it. And I literally spent hundreds of hours looking into this. And you realize that NASA was set up by Nazis and Freemasons after the Second World War. Nazis brought over to the States. And then it was based on models of satellites that Arthur C. Clarke invented in 1945. And within under 10 years, they were live spinning around the Earth, apparently.
So he invented, when you say he invented satellite imagery, I mean, did he where did he base that out of then?
He was a science fiction guy, and he actually took some basic math and the theory of gravity and said, well, if you had something spinning, constantly falling around the Earth, it could remain in orbit. And then within a decade, they were up there, apparently.
Wow. So in like an L. Ron Hubbard art imitates life type situation.
Yeah, like if people want to look into this you kind of need to see the visuals. Me sitting here probably will sound more insane than any form of credibility, but if you look at Bubbles, NASA spacewalks, you look at Tet's Truth Tube, tribute to Lojo, L-O-J-O, Learn of the Jesuit Order, you start getting into these weird cult, not cults per se, like you get into New World Order, Illuminati type stuff, but the images of astronauts in space with bubbles floating up, they're there. They were broadcast live. They haven't retracted those. They're there. You can still see them.
Like astronauts doing moonwalks.
No, okay, so I skipped from moon to spacewalks.
Spacewalks. So they're in space, but they have bubbles, and that is an artist rendition of that? It's like a bubble coming from the mouth, like that.
Like a bubble coming from whatever they were working on and floating off and then floating back across the frame. And NASA explains it away. That's space junk. That's just space junk. Or that's just a debris or something like that.
Wow.
And you start looking into it, and there's people going, oh, yeah, they filmed this in a pool. That's a projection. The reason you don't think they're filming it in a pool is because it's night, and they only ever show those pools with the blue tone to them in the day where they train. So you start going down these. It's a rabbit hole. It's insane, and it could make you insane if you didn't do sanity checks or have critical thinking. And then they're like, well, what about the zero gravity inside the space station? And then someone comes along and goes, the space station doesn't exist. They film that stuff with the astronauts suspended upside down on zero-G planes and in studios, and they use wire rigs, and they have zero-G 45 seconds at a time. And then you're like, what? And you start looking at it through these lenses, and you're like, oh, whoa, this is crazy.
Okay. How do you explain the experiences of, I mean, you mentioned like Buzz Aldrin and whatnot, but like how do you explain modern experiences of like, say, Commander Hadfield?
Do you want my blunt opinion?
Yes.
I think he's a fraud. I think he's never been to space. I think he's a Freemason and a liar. And the airport named after him in Sarnia should be named after him maybe as a joke, so we remember not to be fooled by this type of thing. And when he did that singing in space. He was in either a zero-G plane, a studio, and all of those parabola, whatever those Perambola, the window, multi-windows that they go into,
right,
was green screens. And it's a total hoax used, here we go, to prop up the illusion that we live on a globe floating through space. And it sounds insane until you research it. And like, I might have fallen victim to an elaborate psychological operation by the CIA or something like that. However, I've put my time in, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. But at this stage, I'm willing to say that. I'm willing to say that.
Because you're staking your whole, your everything on this.
I say this. I've made other videos about this, and then you look at after Apollo 11 came back to Earth. Yeah. Apparently, right? Like
apparently.
Well, because there's no footage of the astronauts getting onto from one shot, one unbroken shot of the astronauts getting onto the rocket or getting onto the shuttle, and then them going up. It's always they cut away and like. Are they on that thing? Is the space shuttle an airplane? Are there those jet engines? Have you listened to the space shuttle landing? It sounds like a jet engine. It's built as a plane. There's all of these things that start to come. If you look at the the 7 people from the Challenger are still alive. 2 of them are now claimed to be their twin brothers.
Wait, from the 80s?
Yes,
the Challenger.
It's insane. You start looking into this stuff. If you look into it, no one looks into it because it's wrapped in emotional layers. I was a kid when that happened. That was a tragedy. I don't want to look into it. But then you look into it and you're like, wow, the parents of that astronaut who apparently died, they don't really look like they're very sad.
How many people allegedly?
It's super weird.
How many people allegedly died in the Challenger?
7, I believe 7.
7, and you say 6
are still alive.
Still alive?
That people have found. 3 of them are using the same names. One is using her middle name.
How can they get away with that? Like how are they not?
Because
no
one's gonna look into it.
How are they not like, oh, Julie, I thought you died? Like like how is that not a? Do you know what I'm saying?
It's a good point, and I think that a lot of these people are if they're doing these type of things, they just go, what are you talking about? No, that wasn't me. Like it's the kind of thing where. Even if all of the people that she knew or she had moved to a new place or changed her name, or people go, I have proof that this is, the mainstream media outlets, the classrooms, and people of good social standing,
right.
Because they've wrapped it in emotions, they've like, I was really sad when that happened, it was a tragedy. And they're never going to talk about it and go, wait a second, it'll never catch.
I think that's very, very interesting. I don't know enough about that to either debate you on that.
I'm not saying it's true or false. What I'm saying is that 3 months ago, if you told me that the Challenger was, what? No way, that's crazy. And then you start looking into it. But alone, it doesn't really hold up. But when you bring in Flat Earth, and you bring in NASA, and you bring in the fact that the logo has a serpent tongue in it, and there is symbology here. And while I was looking at all these, like, they're conspiracy theories, essentially.
Right.
While I was looking at them, I was sort of learning about ancient Babylonian sort of, Illuminati, people who control the world. Why would George Bush invade Iraq? It's a lot of it might be to do with oil, but maybe it's actually to ancient tribal bloodlines covet that area of the world for various reasons. And they start getting into like Stargate type mysteries and
what?
Wait, you can start getting into this stuff. But the main thing that all of these sort of like really, really high-end conspiracy theory type things like William Cooper and whatnot, like Alex Jones in this community of like really high-end conspiracy people is seen as a gatekeeper and a shill, and Joe Rogan too. Like, not to discredit those guys at all. I think they're really interesting. But a lot of people in there are like trying to get to the real truth. And what they're saying is these ancient bloodlines that have ruled essentially over humanity are constantly battling each other. And they have secret knowledge. They have Rosicrucian, Rosencross skulls. They have skull and bones and all this, and probably others. But they have secret knowledge. And I'm curious, if there's secret knowledge, what is it? Like, what could they possibly have that would be so valuable that they would essentially start wars and things like this? And I'm willing to bet that if it exists, it's something like the shape of the Earth and our interaction with the universe is different than we're taught in school. And that's not to discredit any researchers, any teachers, any educators at all, because if we have been essentially indoctrinated in a false version of reality, no one's at fault for their interpretation and not knowing that. And like I studied geography.
Yeah, no, I and that's where I have to say, like, I read this book a while back. I think Dan Brown based the Da Vinci Code on it. Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It's a very long, hard read. It's a long, hard read. It's not a very easy read, is what I'm saying. It's mostly just bloodlines for like 3/4 of the. It's like 600-700 page paperback. It's a big, like for a paperback, it's whatever. But then it kind of gets near the pinnacle of it all. Spoiler, yeah. And then it starts unlocking like a little bit why all these bloodlines matter. And a lot of it is that, because it's like you said, it's the founding of the Rosicrucian movement, the Tempests, the Templars fall and rise, and like these are all parts of all this history that we're aware of, and that's the thing, like those things exist, and then we move modern society ahead, like, oh, that was just such strange times, blah blah blah. But it makes you think that they were protecting something, some source of something. Now, I am much more routed in my mind state is much more rooted in thinking about. I'd rather have all the facts from all sides, and then have critical thinking analyze what I really feel about it, rather than just I heard it one way. It's how I did it. It's how my family does it, and it's how their family before them did it, and etc. Like that seems regressive. That doesn't seem very smart at all. But then there's this like other swing to that where it's like you can go without having one foot on due process, and it gets frightening. There's this frightening loss of reality, so to speak, where you're like, okay, what is real? What is so I think people clutch to that. People gravitate more to having one foot on sure footing, so to speak. That's why they call it that. It's sure footing. It's that nothing will move under that, even if your theory of gravity is different. That's how I feel. But I read something here. Tell me what you know about this. In preparation for this episode, I read on alternate theories of gravity is what I typed in. The one I read that I thought was sort of fascinating to me was that rather than having these celestial bodies in the universe that create their own fields of gravity, rather than have these giant planets that just are sucking everything in, rather than have that, it's more that in a galactic sense, these celestial bodies are actually moving what we would perceive as upward, and that upward propulsion of the planet is moving at like 9.2 feet a second, essentially, and by doing that, it creates the feeling of being pushed down to that planet, and that's essentially gravity in that theory. So much like
that would require a flat Earth to do so, right?
Right. That's the idea, the flat Earth, and the idea behind that was that like the example provided was like a rocket, like if a rocket was taking off from Earth in our traditional sense, what we think right now, if a rocket was taking off, the people inside, you always see their face pulled back, and they're like, all the G-force, so to speak, is being pushed down on them. That's what the whole planet is doing in that sense, and that's why water stays on the celestial. So I was thinking about that on my way down here today, and it's like that's not enough to sway me. That's like I don't think that's like. That's not my personal interpretation of it, but just knowing that there's like alternate theories out there that have like some basis to it in the math behind it. I'm not speaking on the math, but the math behind what I was reading, I don't know. I don't know enough about math to disprove it, but I mean it makes somewhat.
But aren't these all provable?
You can prove the speed.
No, what I mean is that like
unless Seymour's finally like, okay, I have to.
Like,
I should have bet you, by the way. I should have. I know. He's like, I'm just gonna let you rock. He's like, I'm gonna let you rock today. I was like, you'll jump in.
Like, in 2017,
right?
We don't have space travel in the sense that it's not like Star Trek or like Star Wars,
right?
Yet. Assuming that we don't die in some fucking horrendous apocalypse and humanity keeps going, we're going to have this easy, like, to go to space is a thing that you can do. Or will have to do, or whatever. So it's just a matter of time, right? Like, isn't it not? Or is it somehow like this is designed against us and we'll just never, like, you could have said in like 1,000, whatever, that like people can't fly. This is what an absurd notion.
You could have said
and
that
now,
like 100 years ago.
It's like,
200
yeah, sure.
years, yeah,
but
200
now,
years ago.
not 100, but
No, 200 years ago you
sure,
could have said that.
it would have been a ludicrous notion, right? Like, not even, like, but now it's like, flying is like, I can go and fly in minutes from now. And so, like, that's what happens, right?
Yeah,
so, like, it stands to reason that in the future, we'll have the ability to know. And then we'll just be debate over, yep, look, it's a globe. Done. Like, and all this extra theory and, like, all this extra work is just nonsense in terms of, like, busy work.
I agree with you. However, every single photo of the Earth has been provably or admittedly a construction of multiple photographs, an artist rendering, like a painting.
Sure.
And or
actually, a friend of ours just did
graphics.
some.
They're all fake. All
what
those
I mean
globes,
is that,
do you imagine?
can't you know, like, once we can all go and we all have to see for ourselves, apparently, because no one's telling the truth. So, we can just go and go, nope, yep, circle.
You know what's interesting? I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey the other night, and I don't know if you remember the scene where he gets on that sort of revolving gravitron thing, and he does the video phone with his daughter because it's his daughter's birthday. In the background is Earth, which is spinning because he's on this like Ferris wheel, and the image of the whole Earth. Then this was 1967. This was released, Stanley Kubrick.
Right.
The Earth was essentially covered in sort of haze and clouds, and it was gray. It didn't have the bright blue ocean and the outlines and stuff like that.
The pale blue dot.
Yeah, well, that's what showed up later.
Right, yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that if you start going back through some of these images alone, you start to realize that potentially the whole moon missions could have been set up as a reason to go high enough or far enough away from Earth to have the ability to take a picture, so then you could just release the image of the Earth. And the image of the Earth, if you showed that cloudy thing to people, they might go, that doesn't look like the Earth. Right. They would want to see something that looks more like what they imagine the Earth to be. So if you start going down this like perception rabbit hole, maybe the moon, not only did the moon missions never happen, the Earth that they showed people wasn't even representative of what it looks like. It was fake, but more people believed it. It's like this super elaborate form of magic. And at this stage, no pun intended with rocketry, I sincerely believe that, and I might be wrong, but I can go back through the points of reference and of observation that got me to here, so that if I'm wrong, I can go, well, this is where I tripped up, and the suspension of disbelief was too high. Or
you know, you brought up artists earlier, and you brought them up again, and I was just mentioning, like, our good friend of the show, Noah Stacey, just did some work for NASA. And prior to this conversation,
and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory,
and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's right. He's already is well documented his work in the video game industry and illustrations, and he's a fantastic painter and all that. But like him getting that NASA credit, I was like, wow, that's a huge get. That's a good look for you. You know, that's awesome. And in the context that you're describing, because he's doing C-Mart, was it? Noah did like artist rendition of like a settlement.
Yeah, on the like a idea of like an advanced moon base far or sorry, it was Mars.
Mars.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's what I was asking.
It's kind of like they land. Like the idea is that they land and then they build a settlement. And then, and their game they previously made is kind of set up for like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you can kind of look at it from that kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of like what's year 30 look like on Mars,
right?
Or whatever.
And so I mean, not that I want to.
And it's an interactive demo too, so people can interact with it.
The only thing I want to say is like, so I mean, that is real life. That really happened. That Noah did this artwork.
Sure.
And stuff. But through the filter of what you're saying is. It wouldn't be that much of a stretch under your hypothesis that NASA could hire someone like Noah to do that type of work in order to propagate their theory. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's how you do it.
Because this was like a week ago. Like he just released it like last or midweek or something like that. Yeah.
And everyone goes, well, there's no way any of this stuff could be a lie. Not that many people could be in on the secret. And
that's usually my first thought. Is like not that many people can keep a secret.
How many people at like Enron do you think knew that the books were cooked and that the company was going south hard? Like 2 weeks before it was. I bet there was like 4 or 5 people in the whole.
But there's
company.
a vested interest there.
There's probably
Like,
Yeah.
as a person that works there or is somewhat involved, would it not be?
Isn't there-
Would it not behoove you to?
Wouldn't it be an easy argument though to say that there's a vested interest in the economy
Sure.
and like the economy of education, like right now, just so to speak, like. What do you think it would cost to reprint every book to re-educate every human on the planet?
I've started buying them. I've started buying old textbooks and like
Really?
atlases. I think my child
math
may
books?
not. She might not believe. So check this out. This is far out, but I'm not joking. I'm actually doing this. She might not believe that we all thought the Earth was round and only round, and it might be hard to convince her or to convey to her that, oh no, like everyone thought it was a globe. There was no. Like everyone, like, and here the textbooks, like there was no alternative. Anyone who thought of and she's like, oh. So in the future, in 5 years, I mean, go back 3 years. Who thought Trump would be president, right? So
That's true.
These things, when they come up fast and out of nowhere. Who thought we would be taking pictures of our food,
Right.
and posting it to a blog and then saying thanks for the likes or what? Like these things come out of nowhere. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that necessarily will come true, but like. 2 months ago, if someone told me that, oh yeah, SpaceX landings, they're all fake and they're all CGI, I'd be like, what? And then you look into it. No one looks into it. Though.
I'm sorry, I'm only laughing because like the confidence that you say that, and I love it. I love that because I know you believe it.
Yeah,
like I know you
I'm
believe
laughing
it.
because it seems so insane. It seems so. It's
I have
so
to ask
insane
again right
that
now.
no one will do it.
I have to ask again right now. Is this a troll? Is this a modern trolling by the fantastic mind of Kyle MacDonald?
Absolutely not. And if I have been hypnotized inadvertently to go down a rabbit hole where it's all lies and I'm fooled, I'll admit it if I come out of it. And
Is there a conspiracy theory that you don't believe? It sounds like you've covered them all. Like, what do you stop at lizard people?
It's funny with lizard people, yeah, because I'll explain. I'll get back to lizard people in a sec. But I made a pretty conscious decision to I'm gonna accept all conspiracy theories at face value, that they're all true, and then work backwards to see which ones aren't.
Yes.
And lizard
like that
people,
idea,
even
yeah.
David Icke, who's the English guy who pushes the
yeah.
lizard people, he goes, I've never seen them, and if they do exist, they're fourth dimensional, and it's more of an energy field manipulation. And it's sort of the thing where you can't prove it, so it would be a genius fake conspiracy to push, but it's actually more metaphorical. If someone is close to power and they have reins over certain levers, they might more easily be manipulated by evil. That's, I think, metaphorical.
I think David Icke's theory, particularly on that, I think because I've listened to many of his talks, many of his people would give him platforms to speak and then ridicule him, which is why I said I didn't want to do that to you today. I don't like that they did that to him.
He was right about pedophilia. He's been saying it for 20 years.
He definitely said that there was massive elite pedophilia rings.
And now they're coming down like hard. They have 1,000 arrests in the last month.
1,000 arrests. There was 400 in one day. 400 arrests directly linked to
former
sex.
Prime Minister, I forget his name, of Great Britain.
Tony Blair?
No, a guy back, I believe, in the 60s or 70s. He's like, oh, it's getting full blown out now. Yeah, it's interesting. It's the most heinous topic in the world, I would submit, and no one wants to talk about it or think about it. And the fact that a lot of that could be true is disturbing. But also, if that's the case, we need to end it. It needs to be ended.
I agree. The thing that I tell you, like, I'm listening, and I just want to hear you out because I think I'm fascinated by the human experience of this. That I know you're a brilliant dude, and that by definition, what you're saying, I should be thinking you're crazy and dismissing you. But the thing that keeps the door open for me, and with what you're saying, is that every time you make a statement about this, you're very quick to add, I might be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll totally admit it if I'm wrong. When you say that to me, that's the type of critical thinking that does not exist with many, many idealists out there about many different topics.
I'm more of an ideaist than an idealist, I think.
I like that.
I might be wrong, and
please,
I encourage everyone to do their own research. I'm not trying to convince anyone on this stuff, but if asked, I'll answer honestly. And I think in 5, 10, 20 years, these ideas will be proven completely insane. Like, whoa, you're totally out to lunch on those. Or it will just dissolve, and 98% of people don't care what the shape of the Earth is anyways. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, cool, it's flat, whatever. And they'll just be like, watching, no disrespect on anyone who watches TV, but they'll just be like, cool, like just watching, doing something else.
They'll tweet about it. Hey, did you know this? Crazy. No one gives a shit.
Or like, yeah, flat Earth is too mainstream now. It's like, you know, like the alternative, like people ironically worshiping the sphere.
I thought the world was flat before it was cool. I like their first album.
So like, I had a question on this. So like,
Chris Martin's closing his eyes, thinking about this very difficult.
Like, is there an end to the flat Earth? Like, is there an edge?
That's the thing about flat Earth is that nobody knows for sure because there's all kinds of, and I think this is healthy. There's alternative theories, and one is that it's flat and there's an edge, and no one actually in sort
of
like
a hard edge to the Earth.
No one in like real mainstream flat Earth now. There's drama and there's shills and there's weird stuff going on. Nobody in mainstream current flat Earth thinks there's an edge. Some people believe that Antarctica is not at the southern pole, that the Earth is flat, it's a disk, and that Antarctica is a ring around the outside. And there's no South Pole location, it's a sort of perimeter. Okay. And there's an ice wall, and some other people think...
Game of Thrones ice wall.
Yes, and some people think there's a dome over the entire Earth. Some people think we're on an endless plane in all directions. Other people believe we're on more...
But those are provable things, right?
Like you could
take a plane... You could take a long-range spy plane that can fly around, or a refueling plane, and do it.
Yes, and nobody does. There's no public record of planes circumnavigating across the South Pole, so it leads people to imagine that it's a cover-up and all this. And the Antarctic Treaty Room, where they sign all these documents, is literally in the center of the room where they sign these documents is the triangle without the capstone on it. And there's symbology here. And Admiral Byrd, he was like a noted sort of Illuminati,
like BYRD.
Yeah. And there's interest, and the mountains right near the South Pole, the mountain range is the Bush Mountains, and that's named after Bush Senior's grandfather or something, and they're apparently related to Vlad the Impaler, Count Dracula, and there's all these old mysteries and stuff that come together to form this idea that it's a huge conspiracy, which it may or not be. I believe currently that the Earth is flat, but when you walk in any direction, you actually come back to where you were.
Like a video game.
Like a video game. And the only way to map that reality into a three-dimensional shape is to actually use a sphere. But we don't live in a three-dimensional reality. We live in a fourth-dimensional reality. The fourth dimension is time. You can't be in all places at once. So you can only... It gets kind of loopy really quick. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. But it's cool because there's alternative theories that are competing and debating each other. It's not just... This is this. It's not stasis. It's actually active debate. I think that's really healthy.
Yeah, not static thinking where this is how it is and everything else we move from this point. I think that having healthy debate is really important. It's even if our views are different on these particular subjects, the idea that we can discuss them rationally without personal attacks and ad hominems and straw men, I think it's important. Regardless what we're talking about, even it doesn't even matter what we're talking about, but if this serves as like example that you can be able to discuss things rationally and not have you're a libtard, oh you're a Republican idiot, blah, blah, like or look at these con idiots, these conservatives probably deny climate change and all this. It's like all that stuff are just blanket statements that don't get us anywhere. They're just insulting at best, and they're deceptively. I don't know. They're just terrible at worst. Like
they're simplistic.
Simplistic. They have very little meat to them. It's so easy to dismiss. It is the easiest thing to dismiss someone.
The climate science one is interesting because we don't have time to debate this. The debate is over. We need to act fast. It needs to be wide-ranging and top-down. Those are 4 or 5. Whoa.
Oh yeah, we're talking climate now?
Change. Climate change. Those are major. For me, whether or not the climate change is real, when a person in a position of power is looking to take away rights quickly without debate, that's just red flag after red flag after red flag after red flag.
What rights are being taken away?
You'd be taxed on all carbon. So if you burn something, essentially you're taxed on it, which essentially I don't know if that's wrong or right, but that's always a red flag when someone says that.
But that's not a right.
With right to breathe, you were breathing out carbon. There's a lot of parts of the carbon.
I think maybe the right not being discussed is probably the right to taxation with representation, not taxation without representation. Where
you're taxed on all sorts of things that is not a right.
What do you mean?
Like pick a thing like food. You're taxed on.
Hold on.
things.
You don't think you have the right to eat?
No, you do. What I mean is that like you're taxed on lots of things that you might consider.
I think the financial impact of like a carbon tax, whether or not it would be beneficial in actually fighting climate change as it is, I think anytime the weird equivalency of money is brought in as a solution to like a non-money issue, you know what I mean? Like how much money could fix the earth? That's my question. Is there a number?
I think you need to look at the language. The people who don't agree with the sort of mainstream Paris Accord story are called climate change deniers. It's like, no, these people actually don't deny it. They are saying it's happening, but it's happening for different reasons. And if you actually look into essentially all the scientists and climatologists who have not been invited to any of these talks because their views don't adhere to the party line on this stuff, and it's more political than it is scientific, actually. People always talk about consensus. There's no consensus in science. It's all about having the best idea and putting the best idea forward. And that.
What about when theories have to go through the process of being academically peer-reviewed? When they need to be pure, like that's why all these clinical trials take so long. You have to do all your trials and then retrial and then have them go through these peer studies and then have them peer reviewed. Like how do you?
It's a good basis. The scientific method is a good method. However, if at any point in that chain, because you're stacking things on top of each other, if there was major errors, politicking, withheld information, or one theory was pushed over another because of favoritism or something like this. Let's assume this happens because I guarantee it does. I don't have any specific examples.
Yeah. Okay.
When you start stacking these things on top of each other and you start stacking them again and again, you get to one point down the line where this idea might be based on a lie from 400 years ago. The idea that it's carbon causing the atmosphere to warm is actually backwards. When the atmosphere warms, the carbon dioxide, very different carbon and carbon dioxide. So I'm already misstepping into carbon, which sounds dirty and sooty, but carbon dioxide is plant food. So as the Earth climate warms and changes with the solar cycle, which is very natural, and the albedo of vegetation in cities, you actually get more carbon dioxide released to the atmosphere. So it's a misread. They use the carbon before warming, but it's actually warming before carbon. But when you get more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, plants grow better. So you actually get a negative feedback loop. You start getting, as you get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it doesn't necessarily warm. It actually might create more plants, which might actually cool it down. And it's complicated. It's not a zero-sum thing. All of the climate change alarmist models are based on computer modeling. Very few are based on actual. Very few can predict with any accuracy moving forward, and none can predict looking backwards. And actually, a lot of these models don't even have the sun, the changing solar intensity in their calculations. They don't even have the sun in the calculations. So there's a lot of red flags there. But if you bring up these points, you're immediately seen as ignorant, denier. What I'm noticing is when people use a weasel argument, they go denier or a flat earther. That person almost universally has far less knowledge, not wrong or right, the right knowledge or whatever, than the person they're accusing. It's like you're ignorant. It's like you want to debate sphere theory, or I'll go toe to toe.
And that's the thing. I think when people are presented with ideas that are admittedly, I would call them radically different than what they are right now. I think when people are presented with ideas like that, the dismissive nature that people instantly go to, these weasel comments, they are incredibly insulting, or blanket statements, things like that. I think when people do that, it's a weird insecurity, because I feel secure enough in my own belief system, and by system I mean how I interpret information, how I take in information and how I critically assign it. The ability to think in your head and have 2 points of view in your head and have that argument in your head, and then have that come into an opinion that you form, what you consider a rational opinion. Having that is such a huge process for most people that they latch onto the first voice and they don't necessarily try to examine it. I try to go from failure. I start from failure and I work back.
Yeah.
How is this going to fail? Okay, let's start from failure, and then I reverse engineer it into an actual working idea, that kind of thing. You're right about people having less less knowledge when they use those kind of statements, though, because
They're powerful. It's a powerful persuasion tool.
It is incredibly powerful, and I think here's the thing: when someone is of the mind state that it is to like, first of all, argue with you and then attack you rather than listen, you know, the insecurity I read from that is that when they learn something, they need to adopt it. Like, you know, Lenny Bruce, who was if you guys don't know Lenny Bruce out there listening, he's one of the first comedians to go against censoring in the mid 50s. Lenny Bruce, I can't listen to his stuff. His material is like
it's different era.
It's different era. It's way too pop reference at that time. He's like, hey, you wouldn't believe what happened to old Sal down to the. It's like, I don't know who the fuck old Sal is, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, but his take on things is, you know, if you have knowledge of syphilis, okay, you can know about it. It doesn't create a contract where you have to, you don't have to be infected by it.
Yeah, exactly.
To know about it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So just merely having an idea doesn't mean you have to adapt it into your life. So that's why I'm listening to you and I'm like, okay, like I don't necessarily have to adapt any of these things you're saying to my life, but I find it interesting. And I think people that immediately are dismissive of those things, where they're like, I don't want to know anything other than what I know, and that's my little echo chamber, and I only hang with people that think like me, and I only do like that. It's like I turned around from that about 5 to 6 months ago, maybe 7 months ago. I noticed a lot of people in the left right wing paradigm that were I just deleted another guy for something, and I was involved in that. I was like, I just blocked some dude for being an idiot, and I started realizing who was in my list. So I started going through my social media lists, and I realized everyone I was looking at would probably agree with me on something that I would say. So I started thinking I wanted to seek out other people that did not think like me. And it's almost a weird concept in social media, because you usually want people to follow you, your point of view and all that stuff. I started looking for these other like alternate thinkers, so to speak. Even the word alternate right away, people think you're thinking like talking alt-right and all that shit. That's not what I'm talking about. I watched
the alt-right thing happen from pickup to slander to then turned into race. Like, it went from, it's a bunch of younger people that have fiscally conservative, socially liberal views. And there's a few on the far alt-right side that have questionable viewpoints, but they're there exercising free speech, and ultimately everyone should have a voice. You just use your voice. I watched the whole thing, and then Clinton campaign said that the frog is racist, and then people started immediately going, Pepe, like the Pepe thing in Pakistan, and
C-Mart, you're social media savvy.
It is.
Is Pepe the Frog a racist meme?
I mean, it's used by people with some like shitty attitudes for sure now.
But does that make it inherently racist?
No, but I mean, symbols are important. In all things, right? So
but I don't look
one
at
has
that.
been appropriated,
but that means it's been around a lot longer than
absolutely
some cunt
but
with
so
a
has the
dial-up
swastika been around for a long time. It's supposed to be a symbol of peace. Is it now? No.
Depending on where, and it's all over India.
I know. Yeah, and what I'm saying is that like
that's a good point.
How else do we define things if we can't go like, that's usually this?
I think it's important.
Right? Like, fuck, it'd be so difficult to navigate life if we couldn't go like, oftentimes that's a piece of shit.
I agree with you.
Right.
But you have to look at where that slander came from, and it came from, politics aside, this is a fact, Hillary Clinton's campaign said Pepe is a hate symbol, and then the ACLU came in and backed it up, and right away, the internet was awash with people going, anyone who's Pepe is racist, and they're ignorant, they're anti all this, and it's like, I watched the whole thing happen. Like,
it was almost like...
I was watching the Pepe crowd before it got slammed by the Hillary campaign.
Right, so that crowd was probably then felt emboldened to adopt it even harder.
I mean, like
afterwards, right?
Or whatever, right?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
So it may not have even actually been that type of thing, but because suddenly she may have made it more of a symbol, that campaign may have made it more of a symbol. I can see that.
You can pinpoint the moment when it was used as a political strategy.
That's ridiculous.
And then people brought it on, and then they turned into anime, right? And then, but you see this parroting of these. It's propaganda. People think propaganda. They think like, Cuba or World War II or something like that. And it's like, no, it's real. It's called PR. What they did to the term propaganda is they renamed it public relations. It's the same thing, but now there's sort of this thing where in mainstream media where they called it fake news, and now it's going back the other ways. Then alternative facts, and then it's so crazy. Like, yes, I have an alternative fact to the one that's on the front page of the newspaper because I was there. Like, and people are saying this, and you see this like mainstream consensus reality forming, which is important to be on the same page in terms of being able to relate with people. But if that's not true, it's like a patriotic duty of like actually moving the ball forward to bring in those alternative facts. And they're already slamming like truthers. So people seeking the truth are somehow like bad now. It's crazy. Though the way that the media now is slamming people who are looking into things for themselves is the most bizarre conformist.
I think we'll see. Yeah, I mean, this is a weird time.
Yeah,
for sure. In terms of, like,
I agree. Could you imagine if Trump decided that he was going to say that like bad news or bad luck Brian as a meme was like, well, that's just strictly for the Democrats, and everyone's like, oh, the bad you like that meme? That's a terrible meme. That's the equivalent of how stupid that is.
People who hated George W. Bush, like vehemently, or however you pronounce that word, like angry, like throwing tomatoes at his motorcade. George W. Bush came out and said something negative about Trump, and now these people are cheering him. It's like people
that
are
is
so
weird.
Simplistic and like reactive. It's crazy.
I'd never thought I'd live in a current society where the actions of George Bush are extolled in such a fucking weird, like, we're talking about
the guy invaded a country.
I know, he's a war criminal. Like, that's a fucking fact.
That's a fact.
He had alternative facts, though.
He did. He used
why they're dangerous.
I have the November 2002 National Geographic magazine with a special insert on weapons of mass destruction. And you go through and you're like, yeah, I remember that fall. Oh, Condoleezza Rice or whatever. Who's the other guy? Colin Powell. Out. Like, they came out and they read that there's
Donald Rumsfeld.
And all those guys. And they said these things, and then all the media outlets like National Geographic came out and said, oh, there's danger, and these weapons are destructive.
That's how they did it, yeah.
And then they sold us on shock and awe, and I tuned in. I was like, I got to see this.
I was actually in high school starting a communications class for the media on the day the bombs dropped in Iraq, the first cruise missiles hit. Yeah. And I remember going in, and our teacher was like, they were very, very smart, or what I perceived at the time. They probably are still very smart. But I think that they prepared me very well. They were saying, like, look, everything you're about to see for the next duration of this war is going to be double-sided, the entire thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was still a pretty young, impressionable mind at that point. And I remember watching the live footage. They like wheeled in the TV, the live footage of the cruise missiles hitting Baghdad, and they were talking shock and awe and all that stuff. And the teacher we had was discussing how yellow cake and uranium and all that stuff, and the ability to process nuclear weapons was such a scary thing, and her generation absolutely would be terrified of that. And I recognize that they went through so many different decades of so many scares of that. But I remember thinking the like almost the infallible nature of North America as a whole. I was like, well, we just shoot it down or something like that, like a nuke. There's no threat. But I remember thinking that the invasion was like fucked, unjust. It didn't seem right that like they could just do that. And I remember having the even scarier thought the next day, which everyone shot me down in class, and I was just like, what's to stop them from doing that in Ontario? Because I was at school in Ontario.
Yeah.
And they would never do that. They're our trading partner. They're this and that. They're this and that. And I'm like, dude, they were getting oil from them. Like they were trading oil, and that kind of thought, they don't want to talk about that because it's about shock and awe. They want to talk about how the U.S. is winning, happen. The Allies are winning, that kind of thing. They don't want to talk about.
Towers came down, and then they had bombs. We had to get in there, so they didn't send those bombs somewhere else. And it's like, you want to go off the deep end right away on that one? Is I won't even go into the 9/11 truth stuff or the Tower
Do you have
7.
theories on that as well? You don't have to get into.
I think it's a combination of a number of factors. The airplanes could have been actually hologram drones. Like there is the technology that can do that.
I have to ask again, Kyle McDonald. Is this a modern troll?
No.
Epic project. You have done some amazing things over the years.
The story that we're told is a bunch of guys took over a bunch of airplanes with box cutters and did some heinous things.
That's the official, like, the handbook story.
And then the towers pancaked under the weight, and then Tower 7 came down because it was damaged. And they had to bring it down. But, like, how did they bring it down? Was it pre-wired to blow? Like, that seems like they don't have bombs in buildings they can just pull. Like, the guy said, pull it.
Pull it.
They had to pull it. And it's like, what? So, but at the time, it was very disorienting, and everyone wanted to find an enemy, and then the enemy showed up, and you get into the history of that. But now there's alternative theories that are the 9/11 Commission report, case closed a few years later or whatever. Now you look at the footage, and the original news clips have very distinct versions of planes, and there's an explosion before the plane goes in, and they could have been holograms, and were there explosives in the buildings, and was the whole thing wired to some sort of crazy free energy atmospheric battery that heated up the metal and turned it into, like, this is where it gets crazy.
Hold on, what?
Dustification. Like, actually,
free atmosphere battery that heated, like, where would this battery be?
Using the towers themselves as sort of like a grounding rod for cosmic atmospheric energy, using the base of those towers were very unique in the fact that they had steel outside, so they were set up to conduct some sort of energy. These are theories. Dr. Judy Wood has about a 2.5-hour talk, I believe. She was at a conference in Toronto. And this might be a total harebrained, send people down like a wild goose chase.
Right.
But what she's talking about is the evidence, like when the towers came down, they weren't there. There weren't 110 stories of towers there. And some people think there was nuclear power plants or weapons in the basement. Some people think they were rigged to blow. Other people look at the footage and they go, you've only seen the footage. You didn't actually see it blow. You've seen the footage, and the footage easily could have been spoofed using computer imagery, CGI. And at the time, though, it was so unthinkable. But then you look at some of the interviews of people on the street, and you're like, oh, that was clearly green screen. And those people just walked through each other because there was an anomaly in the green screen cut. And there are parts of that story that, a decade and a half later that really don't add up. But it seemed, because at the time, no one would imagine it would be faked.
Have you ever watched Blade 2?
No, I haven't.
Blade 3?
I've just seen Blade.
Okay. Because that was like post 9/11. But
Yeah.
there was CGI in that. And
Yeah.
it's shit.
Yeah.
It's shit. The fucking vampires are the worst. I've always held it against them really bad. I love Blade 1. And the CGI is so shit. So my point is, the CGI level was just so fucking god-awful back then.
Yeah.
That how can they realistically convey that to me as a viewer, that they were capable of doing that on a street level?
The CGI that film had a budget for. The day before 9/11, September 10th, Donald Rumsfeld went on to the press conference at the Pentagon and said they'd missed $2.3 trillion that had gone missing.
I have read that. Yeah, I have read
and
that.
And you can watch the press conference. Maybe the thing was fake. Maybe they didn't lose it. Maybe it was to send us off again on a wild goose chase. These guys are operating at a high level of deception and thinking like decades in advance with a very planned strategy that is nimble on its feet. And if that's true, let's say Blade 2 had a $40 million budget.
I doubt it.
The U.S. military and the best talent in the world with a essentially bottomless budget I would argue, could do better. So, and using terrestrial television stations, the resolution doesn't have to be as good.
Before HD, right?
Well, yeah, it was just most Americans saw that they heard it on the radio or they saw it on TV over an antenna.
Mm-hmm.
There was cable in the States, obviously, but a vast majority of people, I believe, watched that using their antenna because it was just available everywhere.
I was playing Diablo 2.
Yeah.
Is that what you were doing when it happened? That was pretty early in the morning for you.
I was on there early.
I was on my way to school, and my dad was watching his money financial talks, like fucking, what the hell is his name? You know what I'm talking about? The fat fuck that has like the buttons he presses.
Yeah.
Mad Money or whatever
Kramer.
the fuck. Yeah, that's it. And my dad's like, some idiot hit the World Trade Center. And then we got on the bus, and as we got on the bus, everyone was talking about it. And by the time I got to school, it was like everyone fucking knew that was
and then it was replays. Very few, like a lot of people watched it live, obviously, but it was the replays that have stuck in our mind. And if you go back and look at YouTube videos, it's all replays. Those live feeds, they're gone. That was that one, and maybe there are anomalies there. That what we're seeing now is as digital distribution goes out, we're able to go back and do media analysis. So when people go, oh, you're doing research on YouTube, it's like, yeah, what am I supposed to do? Like go to university and take a class on like the textbook's going to show me analysis? It's like, no, some guy apparently shot the Russian ambassador, and I'm going through old YouTube videos and I'm looking to see if there's anomalies in that. And sure enough, people go, oh, that Turkish guy who shot the Russian ambassador.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is fishy as hell. And then you start looking into it and it's like, mainstream media is not going to talk that was a setup or that was fake. That happened. That's fact. We're trying to get something going here, guys. We're trying to build up some animosity. And then if you say these things, people go, oh, where'd you research that?
Yeah.
YouTube. It's like, where the hell are you supposed to research this? I want to go further off the deep end with the weapons of mass destruction. They called them weapons of mass destruction, not nuclear weapons. I don't know if that was on purpose, but here's another crazy thought. It's a thought. There's a lot of these are what ifs. What if nuclear weapons don't exist?
At all?
At all.
How do you explain like Hiroshima, Nagasaki?
If you look at the footage of the
Bikini
after effects of Tokyo, Rotterdam, Dresden, and Hiroshima, those other cities, not Hiroshima, were firebombed. And I don't say firebombed like this. I say they were firebombed. Everyone acknowledges that. The wreckage, the aftermath of those cities looks exactly like Hiroshima. And in Hiroshima, there were major fires and all this stuff.
Right.
But we were told that there was a really bright flash, and with nuclear weapons, there's a bright flash. But if you actually put a bunch of like cluster flash bombs in that make a large noise, and then you firebomb, you would essentially get the same effect. And I would argue, if nuclear weapons don't exist, which seems far-fetched because we've all seen this footage, if you go back and look at it, it looks a bit more suspicious. If you stack up enough TNT, it'll form a mushroom cloud. You can scare people not to go investigate because of radiation. If they actually don't exist, the idea that they could exist is all that people needed. And if you had the US and Russia with these things that could take out the world, essentially you could control people to a degree that you could get them to build bomb shelters in their backyard. And in the 50s, there was paint. Like Sherwin-Williams paint was, it'll protect you from fallout and radiation. And they actually sold paint for houses.
Have you heard of that, C-Mart? There's
I haven't.
Special paint.
That's loose. Yeah. That seems loose.
Yeah, of course.
So the reason I'm laughing is these things are so inconceivable because no one's thought about it.
Yeah, I know.
And it's been ingrained, and then it's wrapped in emotion. People died in Hiroshima, and like, of course, they may have been firebombed, but not to say that's any better or worse. So you wrap it in emotion. You put these psychological layers: time, repetition, evidence, footage, generational stories. And then you come out and you say, like, well, what if that whole thing was just to scare people and it was a hoax? Everyone looks at you and they're like, you're insane. And it's like, and not saying that I don't know. I'll probably never know the facts on this one. But wouldn't it be crazy if it was literally the most sane opinion about the matter and how it can be turned to be seen as universally totally insane?
Have you ever heard of Poe's Law?
Maybe.
I only recently read about it in preparation for this episode, but it's essentially the idea that a parody of something can rival the sincerity of that same belief.
Sure.
So at one point I was like, I think this is what Kyle is doing to all of us. Okay, it's such a high level work of a parody of his belief in this stuff that he's geared us to this point. But I'm speaking to you, and I can see, I know the conviction that you're speaking about this. I think you really do believe this. I don't begrudge you your views. I think that like you have your opinion about this. I think that those are interesting theories.
I believe that these ideas could be true, and I also believe I could be totally hypnotized to a false sense of, a real sense of insanity. And either way, it's interesting to imagine how this happens. During the U.S. election campaign, the most interesting coverage I saw of the whole thing was by the Dilbert comic writer and artist, Scott Adams. He was talking about, he goes, it doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't really matter what they do. It matters how they approach each situation, the candidates. And he was talking about how you have two master persuaders using different tactics. And he's a trained persuasion artist, hypnotist. And he goes, it's not about having the best argument. It's about convincing people that your argument is better. And that laying all these things out is, I've realized it doesn't really matter if okay, well, not to say nuclear weapons are safe or dangerous or
right.
zero emotion or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if they exist or not. If they achieve their goal, that's all that's important. And if you start looking at a lot of these things, it doesn't really matter if we live on a flat Earth or a globe Earth. And to the average person who's operating day to day, will have zero of their life will change. But in their brain, they've got that image of what that thing is. And that image, control over that image, is essentially the highest form of mind control, ongoing hypnosis. And he goes, we're not trained, we didn't evolve to be rational, realistic human beings. We evolved to be hypnotized to reality that would allow us to procreate. And we're operating this like multi-point world where there's so many levels of complexity that we latch onto something that works and we stick with it. But so many different variables can work. And when you start seeing everyone has the same story about something, you start to wonder, like, I wonder if someone actually, it's like high order marketing. It's like persuading people to think something. And if you know what they're thinking, you know how they're going to react to any form of evidence. I would say nuclear weapons, energy, on that point, like what I said about do they even exist? Trump put out a tweet, let's have a nuclear arms race. Let's do this until the world comes to its senses on nukes. And everyone freaked out. And they're like, oh my God, it's going to be more nuclear weapons. And at the time, I thought that he might have meant nuclear power, which is a whole other thing than weapons. And it's largely been slandered as a bad thing. But there's a debate over it. And I thought that, and people said, but people don't say nukes for nuclear power. And I said, well, they didn't say bigly either. It's the kind of thing that they might in the future. And then looking at this,
I hope they don't.
Then
I'm really not into that.
But looking at this moving forward, I've realized that he may, if in fact nuclear weapons don't exist, he might know that, and he might have said that to skewer this thought, and he knew it would explode. Bad pun, but he knew it would explode all over the place.
That's a good pun, actually.
And,
yeah, he would be aware.
But ultimately, if that's the case, he's right, because if we go to have a arms race for nukes,
bit of a gamble, though, don't you think?
But I'm assuming
in
if
theory,
I'm assuming if they don't exist,
it
it doesn't matter. It's like it's a shell game. It's fake. It's
the negotiator thing is, you know what? This is why I like you. This is why you're always going to be welcome on the show.
Thanks,
because
man.
you're a critical thinker. I definitely am going to tell you've given me some things to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff to look into at least.
Yeah, I think it. Like I said, it's way more constructive to have you be a guest and to hear you out rather than to tell me your points so I can tell you why you're wrong. I don't think that's constructive.
It feels like you're going to wrap this up. One thing I want to say is not trolling, not like specifically going to troll people, but when you hear a debate going on and you throw a very alternative viewpoint or fact into the mix, the reactions that come back are more telling than the topic itself. And it tells you, I believe, more about what folks have been exposed to. And when people knee-jerk into an angry reaction, they've almost never considered those ideas or those topics. And you can play with that. You can be like, oh, you're a globe licker, you're a ball tard, and you can be a jerk. But it's this interesting thing where
ball tard.
Or I could say like,
I know, right? It's my favorite of those ones.
You could say sphere Earth theory or the theory of gravity. And look, what? No one's heard that before. People think that it's such a fact. It's 100% truth, and they've never questioned it. And I think it's important to not just question everything like a cliche, but like literally everything, like all the big things.
Kyle McDonald, how can people follow you online if they want to follow you in your exploits? I love them.
Kyle McDonald, One Red Paperclip, a Twitter, Kyle MacMac2, the number. On YouTube, they deleted my first account.
Yeah, I was gonna say you'd be uniformed. You get all that
I got
shit,
3 strikes a few years ago. Just Google Kyle Red Paperclip, you'll find me.
What were the strikes about?
Yeah, what were the strikes?
I uploaded a bunch of French-Canadian TV news broadcasts that I was on in 2006, and they.
How dare you?
LCN 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Bye.
How dare you?
Yep.
I think you're fucking awesome to talk to you. So you're always welcome back.
Thanks, man.
C-Mart, how can people follow you online if they are so inclined?
Not a thing.
Not at all, right?
I just wouldn't.
I love it. If you guys would be so kind as to leave us an iTunes review, we'd love that. You can search us. You follow us easily to subscribe. Intergalactic Interviews. We're available on YouTube and Stitcher and iTunes, as I previously mentioned.
No SoundCloud anymore?
I don't promote it.
Okay.
If people want to still
right.
listen on SoundCloud, that's how they want to do it. That's where our feed originates, which is a really ridiculous fucking process with iTunes to go through. So I'd rather not change it.
Change the feed.
Yeah, so I don't want to deal with it, but apparently most of you consume via iTunes. So enjoy. We appreciate you guys commenting on the YouTube videos, though. Last week was nice. So if you guys get involved, we love it. Leave us a review. We are, after all, the award-winning Intergalactic Interviews now. I don't know if you know, but...
Into the next galaxy.
That's right. Second is the new
Assuming
first.
there is a galaxy.
Second's the new first. Into the next galaxy, son.
Gotta make one.
We gotta have a little microcosm of that going. I won't announce next week's guest because I want them to show up. And that's how we're gonna end this. All right, we love you guys. Thank you very much for watching.
Also, just at the end, fuck Steve McGowan. Still,
Oh yeah. Oh, and if you could just throw a fuck Steve McGowan for us.
Fuck Steve McCowan.
McGowan.
McGowan. Oh, fuck Steve McGowan.
Fucking beautiful.
Perfect. I can't stand that guy.
We love that guy.
Nope.
We'll see you all next week. Mwah.